It is just like Jesus to bring life out of death. It's just like Jesus to take ordinary things and make them extraordinary. It's just like Jesus to give us second chances. It's just like Jesus to set the captives free. I'm going back over the series that we're bringing to a conclusion today called Just Like Jesus. And one thing that's kind of resonated with me the whole way through the series is that you kind of have to know someone to be able to say that it's just like them, for them to be like this. For example, a lot of you know Dan Sutherland, our lead teaching pastor here at Westside. And you know that it's just like Dan to want to talk about one of his grandkids to illustrate a message. Am I right? Just like him to want to do that. And if you know him on hang around here every once in a while level, you know that about him. But if you got to hang around him a little bit longer to know that it's just like Dan to have no clue as to where his keys are or where his phone is. But you also know that it's just like Dan to always be there and be an encouragement to your soul if you spend even a second with him. This whole year, 2012, we've wanted to get to know Jesus so much that we can say it's just like him to do this. In fact, if you'll grab your notes with me and wave them, let me know that you got them here. Awesome. Thank you. Look at the big idea of the series, and if you will, fill this in. It's just like Jesus to change everything. It's just like him to change everything. There was death. He made life out of it. There was ordinary. He made it extraordinary. It's just like the divine God who he is, that when we have an encounter with him, to change everything. Now, the big idea for today as we sum up the series is really a summary of everything we've looked at so far in John chapters 2 and 3. And the big idea is this: it's just like Jesus to always have more. It's just like Jesus to always have more. When he changes things, he changes them for the good. He changes them for the good. It's like him to always have more. Now, I don't know about you, but I want the more Jesus has if he'll give it to me. Are you with me? I want what he has, and it's not just more for me to be greedy. It's more life. It's more meaning. It's more fulfillment. It's more power in my life. If you know Jesus well, you know this to be true, that it's just like him to have more. His cousin, John the Baptist, who's going to be the star of the rest of our passage here in John chapter 3, knows this about Jesus quite well. Listen to the commentary that he shares with his disciples here in verse 31. It says this: the one who comes from above. By the way, if we put a little quotation mark here, or a little parenthesis, it would be my cousin, who's the Son of God, the Messiah. My Aunt Mary was like a virgin when he was born. It's like this supernatural crazy thing. He's from above. The one who is from the earth, by the way, that's me, John the Baptist says, belongs to the earth and speaks as one from the earth, but the one who comes from heaven is above all. Now, John the Baptist had some history on us, some family history to get in on the inside, but all of us have an opportunity to walk with this guy, Jesus, to know him more and to know as much as his cousin did how much he is from above. And we have the same invitation that John the Baptist had, which was to say, hey, I'm just from down here. Even the very best I have doesn't compare to the more that he has. Interesting enough, this little passage here in verse 31 that talks about how big Jesus is as compared to John the Baptist, who's just down here, it falls in a very interesting place. In fact, this passage is actually a rebuke to John the Baptist's disciples. Here's the deal. They just had two stupid conversations among themselves. Stupid, dumb, embarrassed. I'm sure they're in heaven going, oh, they're bringing this up again down in Kansas. Bringing this whole thing up, making us look like the dorks that we are. Absolutely, they had two dorky conversations that caused John the Baptist to say, guys, he's from heaven. Let it be. What we're going to do is we're going to look at those two conversations. Why? Because we have a propensity to be dumb too. Are you with me on that one? Yeah. I want to know what the traps are between me having just what I have and having all that Jesus could have for me. And we can learn from their mistakes so that we can try to avoid them in our lives and have the more that Jesus wants us to have. What are these two traps? The first one is this. Write it in your blank. My misplaced priorities. My misplaced priorities. Look at the verse here. It's an interesting verse. It seems like it's just out of nowhere, but let's take a look. 25. An argument developed between some of John's disciples, this is John the Baptist, John's disciples and a certain Jew over the matter of ceremonial washing. Now, what's this referring to? It's actually referring back to John chapter 2 a few weeks ago for us at the wedding that happened in Cana. If you weren't here and aren't familiar with the story, Jesus shows up to a wedding and they run out of wine, which is like a horrible thing for the MC to have happen. So Jesus takes some water, turns it into wine, and the party continues. The people that were enjoying the wine already were like, dude, awesome, let's keep rolling. But there was a group there that thought that was the most atrocious thing that could ever happen. You see, there's this ritualistic religious thing that they had going on. That water that was there in these great big jugs was actually used for a nice little ritual called hand washing. Now, we do hand washing for hygienic purposes. Back in their day and in their tradition, they did it for religious purposes. Started out as a great thing. We want to recognize that we need to be made pure for God. We need to be without blemish before God. So let's do this hand washing thing to represent our desire to be pure before God. Started out as a great idea. Over time, they prescribed this activity to multiple situations, 20, 30 different situations that you had to wash your hands. That's why there was so much water on hand to be able to do this at this wedding. The problem is this thing that was a cool religious idea became a priority that when Jesus came in and removed the priority, they removed what they thought was practically holy water. If you're familiar with the Roman Catholic tradition, holy water is water that's set aside. They messed with the stuff. And they're arguing about it a chapter and a half later. Here's the funny part. They missed a miracle. A guy comes in, takes tons of water, turns it into wine, and they're arguing about a theological situation here. Their misplaced priorities caused them to miss the more of Jesus. Now, here's the more. I would never pick water over wine. Are they crazy? Especially if it was that good. That's just nuts. Wine is life. Water is water. More than that, they miss a pretty amazing picture. If you kind of dig down below the surface a little bit, they're talking about water that can only clean you on the outside. A couple years later, Jesus would raise a cup up amongst his disciples and say, this wine is a cup that represents my blood that will wash you from the inside out. They missed the more that Jesus had. They had a priority that was a decent priority. It was a good priority, but it was up here, and they put Jesus here, and they absolutely missed him. A fun question to deal with, friends, is what are some of the priorities that I have in my life that are keeping me from the more that Jesus has? A couple of categories for this. The first one would be in a religious category. What are some of those religious preferences and stuff that we have that may not fit a biblical category at all? Just like the hand washing. That's not prescribed anywhere in the Old Testament, but somehow it had been elevated up to here. What are some of those things? Another way of really identifying what your priorities are is to check your calendar and your checkbook. What fills those things? If I see that on my calendar is filled with this, these are my priorities. Checkbook, what are those line items? Same thing. Our calendars and our checkbooks help us to identify our priorities. But it even goes further than that. Our souls, even on a subconscious level, have priorities. Things that we have to make happen in our relationships, in our daily lives. This priority stuff goes deep. I'll illustrate that a little bit later. But before we go there, I want to go to the second dumb conversation that John's disciples have. And it has everything to do with my inherent self-centeredness. Write that one in your blank, if you will. The second trap here is our, mine, yours, inherent self-centeredness. By the way, if you hate that, that's proof that this is true. You'll catch that a little bit later as you're going through there. But we have this inherent nature about us that's extremely self-centered. Here's what's going on. They came to John and said to him, Rabbi, that man who was with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one that you testified about, well, he's baptizing and everyone's going to him. Guys, I know, but you blew it, so just get over it and come on. I know that they're embarrassed by this. But here's Jesus who came down. John the Baptist actually coached his disciples a while back saying, hey, there's a guy coming after me. I'm not even fit to mess with his shoes. I'll baptize you with water. He's going to baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. That dude's an ace. I'm just a jack. And when he came on the scene, all they wanted was the spotlight, and they weren't in the middle of it anymore. Right? We're the same way. We're just as self-centered as that. We like to be affirmed. We like to know that people prioritize us. We like to have that feedback. Here's the problem. Write this in. We've been talking about how it's just like Jesus to do all this great stuff and to always have more. But according to John the Baptist, it's just like us to prioritize our less over Jesus more. It's just like us to prioritize our less over Jesus more. John the Baptist knows this. He comments on it. John 3:32. He testifies to what he has seen and heard. He's talking about Jesus. He's telling you time after time again of the things that he's seen. And if you don't remember, he's from heaven. All this has been made through him and by him. It's all directed by him. But no one accepts his testimony. No one. He says our default, because of our self-centered, misplaced priorities in our life, we leave Jesus on the shelf. I got some pennies up here. Why do I have pennies in a jar? These pennies kind of represent our less. Jesus is saying spiritually, guys, as far as life, vibrancy, meaning, purpose, fulfillment is concerned, I have bars of gold in heaven for you, but you won't tap into them because you gotta keep your pennies. Do you remember, anybody seen that Lord of the Rings movie? Do you remember Gollum? My precious. Holding on to that gold ring like it's everything. Even though it's killing him, he can't let it go. And later on in the movie, Frodo's got the ring and he's getting to the end and he's wanting to put it on. My precious. And everybody's going, no, don't put the ring on. I mean, everybody's freaking out. Don't put the ring on. We're almost to the end. Throw it down in that big old mountain and watch it go away. But no, we hold on to this stuff. And friends, I'm telling you, this is just like us. To hold on to chump change when the King has laid out life. Let me throw out some examples to see if we're on target. Jesus has invited us into a walking daily relationship with him where he'll teach us, he'll guide us, he'll correct us, he'll even discipline us if we need it. If I'm about to walk into an oncoming train, it would be helpful to know, right? A friend would tell you, dude, a train is coming. You may want to exit the tracks. A person that's not a friend says, hey, dude, it's your life. What's true for you is true for you, and what's true for me is true for me. That might not be a train. I don't know. If your religious practice is a once every other week or once a month or whatever, and this isn't, I'm not trying to say that coming here is what makes you spiritual, but it certainly helps, right? If you're holding on to just, I'll do church every once in a while so I can feel good about it, and you haven't embraced a counselor who will walk beside you every day for the rest of your life, you got something else that's more important. You've got a priority that's misplaced. And somehow you believe that that's your best gig. If you were convinced that he was from above, like John the Baptist was, those priorities would be flipped. Calendar, checkbook. Wow, let me talk a little bit about a challenging situation that I face. Kids' sports. Wow. They cost more money than my house. And they make me choose between honoring God and being on a team. It's very powerful around here. What are my priorities? I'm thankful for a church like Westside that has services all day Sunday, but now there's sports where my kids' team has to play all day Sunday. And I'm torn in between these two worlds because, daggone it, sports are great for kids. They learn confidence, they learn teamwork, they learn all these amazing things that I want my kids to be a part of and pay to make my kids a part of and be there to champion my kids. But sometimes if I've got to compete between Jesus' team and the Dirt Devils, help me out with that one. You know what I'm saying? It might go deeper. It might be a refusal to forgive. Here's the idea. Somebody's hurt you so bad and you're going, I'm never going to forgive them. Like that's hurting them. It's killing you. My precious. I mean, we think that somehow if we hold this bitterness against that person and try to control them that way, that we're really causing them all this pain. Yet inside we're dying, holding on to my precious, these pennies. And Jesus is saying, come, forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. Let it go. Problem number 2, would you circle the word worse? Holding on to my less is worse than I think. Why? John the Baptist continues and he tells us, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Here's what that means. If you're believing him, trusting him, and you're saying, okay, Jesus, if this is the more you have, I'll give up my less, there will be an endless supply of life. There's life on the other side of forgiveness, and it is a lot sweeter than before. There's life in a fellowship with Jesus that goes every day, and it's so much more than anything that you would choose to put on your calendar apart from spending time with him. But here's the part where we get worse. But whoever rejects the Son will not see life. Now here's the really scary part. For God's wrath remains on him. Now, what does that mean? I don't have the time to go into unpacking what all this idea of God's wrath means. That's a whole series in and of itself. I'll just give you one little facet of that diamond today. God's wrath, the Bible tells us, burns against sin. Burns against sin. I mean, God is furious over sin. Why? Because it kills his kids. Sin keeps us going like this, and he hates it. He died so that we could have life. He died so that we could have life to the full. And anything that gets in the way, he just hates it. Hates it with all of his might. Wants to slay it so that we can be free. But until we do, as long as we hold on to that stuff that's ours, we experience junk. Let me give you an example of what that looks like from a personal story in my own life. My wife Carol and I have been married for 18 years this summer. And that says a whole lot more about her than it does me, I promise you. Phenomenal woman, 18 years. And I'm telling you, we have a great marriage, as far as I can tell. I mean, it's good from my perspective. It's a great marriage. And a great family. I mean, we like each other most of the time. And I'm just very, very grateful. But I got to be honest with you, the first year and a half of our marriage was extremely difficult. And my baggage was the culprit. My baggage was the culprit. I had this problem with jealousy. Insecurity coupled with jealousy is a horrible looking thing. You ever heard of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Typically, I'm the life of the party kind of guy. I'm fun, I'm easygoing, I like to do all this stuff. What happens was when I would date someone and they would start to get close, all of a sudden I would shift from being the life of the party guy to this guy that was cold-shoulderish and angry and manipulative and mean. And it was driving relationships away. And I even told Carol when we first started dating, I know I'm fun right now. But here's the problem. When we start to date and you start to get closer to a apparently very tender and wounded part in here, I'm going to start to act like somebody you don't know. And unfortunately, I know him. But fortunately, I know that Jesus has more. And I want it. Problem is, I can't go there and defeat that dragon until some little princess darling's in my life to threaten me. Now, let me tell you, a year and a half later, God completely healed me of that problem. Healed me. How did it happen? That's where we're going to go now. But before we go, grab your whole bulletin and do me a favor. Would like for everybody to do this. We're going to rip it once. In the middle of your bulletin is a little yellow sheet. I would like for you to tear that out. Everybody, if you would, please. Thank you. Love hearing the ripping. Why are we ripping? What you'll see on here is to receive Jesus more, the less I need to release is blank. Just hold on to it. Feel free to start thinking about it if you want, but we're going to use it in a minute. I just wanted the rips to take place now instead of later. How did God heal me? Let me tell you this. What I'm about to share with you absolutely takes spiritual eyes to see. Earlier in chapter 3, John looked at Nicodemus and said, as smart as you are, dude, Jesus has a whole lot more, but you can't see it because you haven't been born again. If you have not been born again in that way, allowed God's Spirit to lead you, dude, I'd just ask him right now to get that stuff going so that you can have the eyes to see this. It saved my marriage and changed my life. Here's what John the Baptist said, because he knew that Jesus always had more. He said this, he must increase and I must decrease. Notice, this does not say, I need to get better and try harder. It doesn't. Ain't no getting better. How many of you have studied general psych before? Yeah? You ever heard of this dude named Sigmund Freud? Yeah? Had a lot of weird ideas. One, he nailed. He broke the human psyche down into three parts. Superego, ego, and the id. And the id is this self-fulfilling, I don't care about anybody else, fill me, hedonistic entity within us. The ego is there to try to get everything the id wants without making everybody around you mad. He got it. He knew that he was self-centered and had these priorities. Here's the problem. That part of us that the Bible calls the flesh can't get better. It has to die. Jesus has to grow in me, and that part must perish. It must die. Listen to the commentary that Paul offers in Galatians 2:20. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live. Here's an interesting thing. Most people that get crucified don't make it through. They don't. They die, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. It's not about getting better. It's about Jesus having more presence in our life, and the only way Jesus can have more presence in our life is if we die. The old Brian must die, not get better. There's your blank. Jesus more doesn't come through a better me. It comes through a dying me. Like I said, you can't see this unless there's spiritual eyes to see it. We think that we're all we have. No. There's a war going on in us between the spirit and the flesh. The spirit wants to win. That's Jesus' presence in us. And when it wins, the other dies and it's no longer there. Carol and I are in this relationship and we're going, and she's committed to being there with me. And one morning I wake up and man, I'm triggered up, had a horrible dream, and I am just going question after question, and it's just getting worse and worse, and I'm just getting more angry. She looks up, I'm doing the cool thing, I'm ironing her clothes. I'm in seminary, she's going to work, so I'm ironing her clothes, and she looks at me after like the 25th stupid question, and she says, "Are you crazy?" And I wanted to say, yes, I am. But I was so mad, and I banged my fist down on the ironing board. The iron fell off. I grabbed that hanger. You could tell I'm really upset at this point. I throw it at the wall. It crashes against the wall. She's over here. I didn't throw it at her. I'd never do that. But I was really, really, really upset. And it was like God, in the middle of that time, grabbed my heart and said, Phipps, here's what you're doing, buddy. Your priority is to control your wife, and the self-centered reason is because you think you can protect yourself from her better than I can. What an idiot. Did you catch that? I was trying to control my wife with all my manipulative stuff because I needed to protect her, because I was absolutely terrified that she would leave me, and the stuff that I was doing would make her do so. And I couldn't see it. And Jesus was saying at that moment, Brian, are you going to die to that? Are you going to keep trying to protect yourself? Or are you going to let me protect you? And I said, at that moment, man, God was so kind. My fists were just like this, white knuckles. He's over there looking at me like, what is wrong with that man? And I just said, Carol, I know it looks like I'm angry. I know it looks like I hate you. I know it looks like I'm disappointed in you. But quite honestly, I am just scared to death that you're going to leave me. And I remember running back to the back of our apartment and throwing myself down on the bed, because that's all I could do, and just shook as I sobbed. She came back, so kind of her, came back, sat down on the bed, started rubbing my shoulders, and she said, Brian, I have no idea what's going on inside of your heart, but I love you, and I am not going to leave you. It was gone, and it's never been back. I didn't get better that day. A part of me died. Thank you, Jesus, for being kind enough to kill me so that I could live. Jesus has so much more for you. In heaven right now, his ears like this, listening. And he wants you to give up something in your life so that you can live. That's this. That's what this is for. What less are you holding on to? What pennies, what precious are you holding on to? That today, a battle, a war can be started in order to let him live in that spot and not you anymore. What we're going to do in just a moment is I'm going to pray, and the worship team is going to come back out and lead us in a song that will give all of us the opportunity to say, Jesus, you are more than enough. You are all I need. You're all I want. And in the time during that worship, what I would encourage you to do is just write down that less, that priority, that misplaced priority, or that self-centered part of you that's killing you and keeping you from Jesus more. And then sometime during the song, just come up, place that thing in the basket and leave it there. And start the process. I can't. Jesus can. I'm joining Jesus. Let's pray together. Jesus, we can't. You can. It is our desire. It's our burning need to join you. Help us, Jesus. Help us to join you today. You are more than enough. Amen. It's a huge step to say, I can't. Jesus can. Join Jesus, even if it means me dying. So congratulations to those of you who have. I have some good news for you. Sit down for just a minute. We've got one more blank to to fill in before we go. Listen to what John says. The man who has accepted it, and that it is the more that Jesus has to offer, has certified that God is truthful. Here's what that means. You will find that the one who's from above is who he said he is, and he'll do what he says he'll do. In other words, here's the blank. Receiving Jesus more increases my capacity to release more of my less. It's such a wonderful thing to know Jesus enough where you can say, it's just like Jesus, to make me die and give me more of him. So I encourage you, keep up the fight and keep up the battle.